This is Chloe Adams, and you're listening to the Badass Boss Babe podcast, a show for girl bosses, disruptors, and overall badasses looking for thoughtful discussion on topics ranging from business to wellness and sex to politics. If you like what you hear in this episode, make sure to hit subscribe. Just by the way, I've got a small child here who is knocking on the
door. Yeah, I mean, she'll definitely calm him down, the mom, but, you know, toddlers.
Fine.
Can you hear him?
A little bit, but it's not a big deal.
Okay, perfect. Okay, good.
It's kind of cute.
It should be fine. I wish I had other headphones like that weren't up. I usually, like, for so long I would carry around regular headphones, but I haven't done that in a long time.
Yeah, me either. Well, I mean, because you can't even plug them into your phone, so.
Yeah, that's why. Well, because I have an iPad still. So I was like, oh, I carry it on for when I use my iPad for stuff. And then once I got the AirPods, that was it.
Yeah, I'm not responsible enough to keep up with AirPods.
I thought I'd lose them too. Totally understand that. So.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. I think this is good.
Okay, yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. So, hey badasses, I'm here with Erica Vargas, a relationship coach and host of the podcast In Search of Good Men, Tinted would recommend listening. Today we'll be talking about creating a man menu to get clear on what you want and need in a man. So Erica, I'm so excited to have you here. You're good friends with Desiree Cruz, my life coach and friend.
Yes.
And I've heard so much about you. And when we were doing prep, I was just like vented on you and like threw up all this stuff at you. I was like, sorry, I feel like I know you because I listened to the podcast.
Oh man, I was totally cool with that though. That's the thing about having friends who are coaches. I think we just go into mode of listening. It's just like the natural of, oh, I can listen. And I forget that, you know, how much I put on my own podcast, that it can actually feel like you know me. So that's cool. That means I'm doing my job, I think.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah. So during my coaching, I created my own man menu, and it was so affirming and eye-opening to me that I wanted to share this technique with other women. So can you tell us more about what you do?
Okay, so I am a purpose and relationship coach. And the reason why I say purpose and relationship is I find that they're one in, like, they're two peas in a pod. So what I mean by that is when people are in search of a healthy partnership, usually the thing that brings them back to themselves is their purpose in the world, whatever that looks like. And their purpose could honestly be, you know, everyone around them, like showing them love and light and being a kind person in the world. It doesn't have to be, I think we get caught up in purpose being this super action-oriented thing where we're doing something out in the world. But sometimes it's just showing up and embodying who we are every day. And when we do that, we tend to attract amazing relationships. So that's why I put both of them into the title. And around relationships, I used to be a dating coach. And what I realized was that it was really easy to teach women how to strategize around dating. There is strategy, women, around dating. But what I found is no matter how good you are at attracting a good man or a good relationship, if you haven't worked on yourself and really built the relationship with yourself, it'll eventually fall apart. And so that's when I created ManMenu, because ManMenu to me was, okay, let's get really clear on who you are and what you want and what you need to be happy. And then the part that I think is the more important part, and then getting really clear on what your offer is in a relationship or even to yourself. So what you find a lot of times in ManMenu is when you build your offer, you realize you're actually speaking to yourself, the world, whoever you're in relationship with. And so that's kind of the starting point for me. I don't think there's anyone out there who can start to work on self-love or partners or finding healthy partnership without building some standards around what that looks like for them and really getting clear on who they are and what they're attracting.
So I love that you brought up that you can't you can be, the best catch in the world, but until you've done the inner work, it doesn't matter. And so during my breakup with my ex-boyfriend, like a couple days later, like, I mean, our relationship was perfect. We like hardly ever fought. He was such a great partner. I was such a great partner to him. Everything was going so well. Like our families, our friends, everyone thought that we were going to get married and like that's the direction that we were in. And then one day I was the love of his life and the one and his person. And literally the next day he came to my house and broke up with me and told me it was because he wasn't in love with me anymore.
Mm.
And I was like, what the hell? But I read this quote a couple days later that said, men can sense when there's something missing in you, and you can have the best relationship in the world, but if there's something missing in you that you haven't done the work,
Mm-hmm.
like the inner work to like fix and resolve and get through, he's always going to sense that part of you and think that it's the relationship.
Mm. Yeah.
And I was like, damn, I just got really called out through a Facebook post. But yes, I 100% agree. And that relationship taught me so much about like the things that I still need to work on to be a better partner.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that. One of the things so one of my mentors is Allison Armstrong, and she's just the queen of, um, you know, she's the queen of how to become a queen. And the term that I learned from her is frog farming. A lot of times as women, we don't understand how we turn these wonderful, amazing men we meet at the beginning of a relationship into men who don't want to be with us anymore. And we get really confused. And I think a lot of times it's because we haven't done the inner work to really become self-aware of what we're doing to be triggered a lot of times. So like we actually get triggered by what men do, and then we become the victim versus like realizing that we're being triggered in this moment, we're reacting to it. And then this man who like was like, wait, who's this? This is not the woman I fell in love with. This is not the woman I adored and started dating at the beginning. And then he starts to kind of shift as well. It's so funny you brought this up too, because I was just coaching someone right before I got on this call, and I was talking about how as women, we don't realize how much we are the leaders in every relationship we're in. We take that for granted, the power of our femininity and the leadership that it brings to every relationship.
I mean, I think every single relationship I've ever been in, I was the one that was emotionally leading the way and like letting these men know that they could be vulnerable and open up. So I 100% agree there.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it is that we have to be the leaders to build that sacred space. And a lot of times we don't even realize that I don't want to say we don't realize, we don't really embody the beautiful feminine power we have within ourselves to be those leaders. What we do instead is we embody the warrior. And my favorite saying to say to every woman is really fast. Am I allowed to cuss?
Yes.
There is no man alive there's no warrior alive that wants to fuck another warrior. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
that's the energy a lot of times, especially in this day and age, that women bring to the relationship is warrior energy. And at first, that's super sexy. That's attractive. That is a guy, he's like, oh, all right, I'm turned on. But that's not lasting. What really is lasting is the femininity, is bringing the goddess to a relationship. And that doesn't have to look all girly and subservient either. And I think that we get confused with that a lot of times as women. And so when I created ManMenu, I was really, really, really like clear that I wanted to make sure that women understood what their goddess looked like, not what Instagram or Facebook or other women or the media says their goddess looks like. I really want to
I
be
mean,
clear.
even if you just look at like goddesses in history, I mean, there's goddesses that like eat children and like lead wars.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's like figuring out who you are as a goddess, and whatever that looks like, that's okay. And then to also really claim your warrior and where that needs to happen. And usually I say that needs to happen in the office. That needs to happen in your purpose, in your career.
Yeah, I was literally about to say, like, as women, we have to be that way at work.
Yeah.
It's just the world that we live in. Like, we live in a very masculine world that's pushed with masculine energy. And I mean, that's just how you have to be at work. And it is what it is. It sucks.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, yeah, it's so hard to come home at the end of the day. And I have to like I've started doing this habit where before a date, I like drop in and I say soften, soften,
Mhm.
soften. And that doesn't mean soften into not a strong, independent, capable woman that I know I am. It's just to soften my energy and get out of that like work mode, hustle, CEO, whatever mode that I'm in until, someone that can receive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm so used to taking care of everything on my own that I am really bad at receiving. And I think a lot of people can identify with that. But as a woman, it's really important that we're able to receive, like not just give and give and give and give.
Yeah. And I think that is why that is why it's so important to me to know, for a woman to know her standards. Because when receiving, sometimes we think we're receiving, but we're receiving the junk. Right? So how many times have you had a woman or a girlfriend of yours be like, well, I'm really upset because I haven't heard from him in 3 days. But you know what? Today he called me and he wants to go out, and maybe he didn't respond to 3 days of my text, but he was just busy, and like suddenly there's all these excuses, and you're sitting there as her friend going like, you're sure making a lot of excuses, right? Because she's willing to receive the junk. Like this is the bottom of the barrel kind of stuff. And I think that's why it's really important for us to not just learn to receive, but to really know what we want to receive and really open the space for receiving the crown, receiving the golden apple, And so I think that's why getting really clear on that supports women versus, I don't really know what I want, which I get a lot as a relationship coach. Well, I don't really know what I want. And I was like, so that's why you're kind of getting the bottom of the barrel right now, because you haven't really gotten clear with the universe on what you want. So the universe is just going to bring you, what's out there right now. And let me tell you, there's a lot of junk out there. I'm going to be honest with you.
There is. I always say dating in San Antonio is like jumping into a dumpster fire.
Well, I always say Austin is Peter Pan syndrome to the max, right? Every man in
Yeah.
Austin just doesn't want to grow up, right? Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a fun city, but first things first, what makes you a badass, Erica?
So I was just thinking about this when I was reading your question, and we were talking a little bit about this before we started. Was at first it was like, oh man, like it's really hard not to be humble when this question gets asked, and then I'm going, Erica, you're a coach. You literally coach women on how to claim their value. So that as a preface, I'm just going to go a little bit into what I think makes me a badass. The first thing is I'm a visionary. So I can think big, I can dream big. It's just this amazing ability I've had since I was very young. I can dream really big, and I can do that for other people. I can help and support other people dream big who've always had this smaller um, perspective of their life or what's possible for their life. And I can actually sit there with someone in less than 20 minutes and they'll be like, wow, like I've never even thought that's possible for my life. And this is the first time I've ever seen that happen. I literally did like a 20-minute session recently where she was like, you just changed everything about the way I look at myself when it comes to dating. And all I did was talk to her about what's her inner magic, and I think a lot of
Mhm.
times that's my superpower, is being a big visionary and helping other people dream big. The other part
I love
the other
that.
thing that I wanted to bring up was, I think the other thing that I really love about myself is my ability to be empathetic and compassionate toward every human being. And what I mean by that, especially when it comes to men, is that and like this will trigger people, but when someone tells me like a man cheated on them, I don't hear like, I don't think, oh my God, what an asshole. Like, you deserve better. I'm not that friend. Don't come to me if that's what you want. I'm the person who's like, wow, what a wounded boy. What a wounded boy that he had a treasure like you in front of him and he had to mess it up because he didn't even think he deserved you. Like, that's the way I see human interaction. I see it from our wounds and from where we're healing and then from what's possible. And
So I'm like that, and I will say it is a blessing and a curse.
mm-hmm. It's
100%. Like, but I will also say I think your greatest strengths also, like for anyone, like your greatest strengths are your greatest weaknesses as well.
oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. I have friends who'll be like, how can you still be friends with that guy? And I'm like, listen, the thing is like, I'm really good at my boundaries. So I know I'm not going to receive any of the junk, and I'm also not going to give him give him any of the goods, but that doesn't mean I can't be his friend and be like cordial and compassionate for what he's going through. But I definitely have girlfriends who are like, I could never do that. And I'm just like, I know it's a blessing and a curse, but
It's actually so funny because I was just this guy that I've been seeing, like telling him the other day, like, oh, like, I have friends that are like men that are absolute scoundrels when it comes to women. They make great friends. I would never date them. I would never leave them in a room alone with my little sister. Like, I would never like be like, hey, like you should date so and so to my friends. Like, ever, ever, ever in a million years. But they are great, fantastic friends. But I have my boundaries with them, and I can have those friendships with
oh,
them.
100%. If anything, I call them the great experiment. I love to go out with them and just observe. Like I'm like, this is just research for me when I look at it. When I hang out with those men, because I have those friends too, and I accept them. I'm like, listen, I accept this is who you are.
And they give you best advice because they're
Yeah.
scoundrels.
Yeah. So I'm like, I'm just going to observe and learn so that I know when these behaviors are showing up in my relationships or relationships of my clients. I'm able to be like, oh yeah, I know. I've watched that animal in action. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Exactly. So, what is a man menu and what are its
All right.
components?
So I feel like I need to give a little bit of background on where ManMenu came from. I actually went through a major divorce at an early age. Most people will be like 30s, or I was 29. 29 is not that young, but for me, I still felt very young, very naive. I hadn't had a lot of boyfriends. I married the first man I felt truly in love with. And so I did a lot of growth and development afterwards to kind of figure out, like, how did I end up here? And when I did this crazy thing called a vision quest, which means I actually went to a mountain and for 3 days and 3 nights was by myself with just water and fasted and prayed. And when I was on that vision quest, I started writing down everything I wanted in my next relationship. And I just was like writing, right, Chloe? I was just writing. Like all these things. I mean, I put
Mhm.
silly things on there, like he has a motorcycle and an accent. Like I was just writing everything my heart desired. And I got to this part where I said, and he loves everything about me. And I started to cry because I didn't love everything about me, but I was putting this huge request into the universe for someone else to love everything about me. And in that moment, I realized that a man menu, and I didn't know it was even called ManMenu at that time, but it was as I designed the workshop after this vision quest, then I realized that's what it was called. But a man menu can't just have the component of what I want, but it also has to have all the components of the things I love about myself and the things that I want to give to my partner, the things I want to share with them. Because if we don't love ourselves, and then we're asking the world to send us someone who loves us, that's already setting us up for a codependent relationship, an unhealthy partnership.
Well, I think like, and I've always said this, like you are a whole damn person on your own. You do not need anyone to complete you. No one can complete you but yourself. So if you're going out there and you're looking for partners who are going to fit in the parts of you that are missing or like need to be improved on,
Yes,
you're going to fail.
exactly. Or you will be in a relationship with somebody, and I've seen these relationships, and I've seen relationships like this last for 30 years. But let me tell you, they don't tend to be the happiest. They don't tend to they don't tend to have the happiest children in those relationships. Like that's what I've noticed. I've seen this. I've observed relationships, and at the end of the day, when there's one complete person and there's one half person, it will affect the partnership. That is not healthy partnership. It's not even partnership really. And so that was my biggest learning in that moment was I needed to figure out how to complete myself and then find someone to complement me. And so a man menu has two parts. The first part is your standards. And they're not, and I call them standards on purpose. They're not expectations. They're not a long list. A lot of coaches will just have you write a long list of everything you want, which is what I did originally. And don't get me wrong, that list works. You will attract those people. But sometimes when you're just writing a long list, you got to be careful what you ask for. So when I did a man menu, I created standards, and standards were really getting a little bit deeper, not just this long list of subconscious and conscious thoughts being put on a piece of paper, but digging a little bit deeper on what are the 8 attributes of a person that really are going to feed my soul. And then getting really clear on what that looks like. So a standard has to be measured. You have to be able to see it. I think a lot of times we say things like, oh, I want somebody who's kind, but your kind, Chloe, might be different than my kind, right? Like what I think looks like kind may look different for you.
Mhm.
So you have to be really clear.
Or your ethical, like, can be different from my ethical, or like your truthful can be 80% truthful, 20, or 80% honesty, 20% like, I'm okay with putting things underneath the rug, and like
Yeah.
I'm not
Or it
like
could
that.
be, I'm
So
okay with 80% truthful and 20% if you need to keep it to yourself, keep it to yourself. And I think there's someone out there like, no, I need 100%. I need to know everything. And there's someone who's like, I'd rather you just tell me I look pretty than tell me, what's really wrong with me. Like we all have different versions of what these words mean. But when we actually get very descriptive on what it looks like. And so I'll use generosity. That's one of my standards is generosity. But generosity is, for me, time, energy, and money. You're generous in all three of those areas. So I can get very specific on what time looks like, that you make time for me. You don't fit me into your life. You actually make the time to fit me into your life. And what that may look like is scheduling things at the beginning of the week with me or the beginning of the month, putting them in your calendar, scheduling them, and understanding I also have a busy calendar and respecting that, right? So that's time for me. Money is not giving me things and like gifts. Money to me is the generosity of, if we go out to dinner and we're with a bunch of buddies, like being the person that says, hey, you know what, I've got this round. Not every round, but hey, I've got this round that isn't sitting there like counting every dollar, because that's not the way I look at money either. And so, and energy, like being present with me. One of my love languages is quality time. So just being present with me is really important. So if we do something, that we're listening, that we're sharing, we're having conversation. And so you can actually take a video camera and watch those those three things happen, right? And you'll know what's happening. And so that's a standard because you can measure it. And so that's the first part of ManMenu, is getting so clear that you know when it's not happening. When you're sitting at a date with someone, you're going, yeah, you're not hitting my affection standard already. You know what I mean? Like you're that clear on what your standards are. And then the second part is what I like to call is claiming your offer. Um, and it's not about what I'm doing
Mhm.
for a man, right? Claiming your offer is what I want to be excited about in partnership, the part I want to bring to the table. Every woman should bring things to the table in their career, in their relationships, as mothers, as friends, as sisters, as daughters. You should always be bringing something to the table, because at the end of the day, that's where our fulfillment as humans comes from, is actually our kindness, is what we bring to the table. We always think it's what we can get, right? Like a lot of times, but a lot of times it's what we bring to the table. I just want to say this does not mean it only goes one way. Doesn't mean you bring that to the table and you're not receiving anything
Yeah.
back. That part I want to get really clear on. But knowing, once you've kind of realized, oh wow, this is a great partner, this is someone I want to build my life with, really knowing how to show them who you are as a partner and who you are as a woman. Now, what I find is women walk out of ManMenu like with the confidence they've never had before, because they're like, this is who I am. And I don't care if you like it or not, or if this is what you want or not. Like, this is who I am, and this is what I'm excited about putting out, not just in relationships, but in the world. And that's my favorite part. I swear, I cry at every time a woman reads her offer out loud during ManMenu. I cry every single time. It's so beautiful. Like, women are just goddesses of the world. They're just so beautiful. And so those are the two components that you walk out with. Um, and then the learnings, you learn a little bit about expectation versus standard, entitlement versus offer. So I go into a little bit of perception. We definitely talk about relationships and the way we look at men. There's all these other little components stuck in the middle of the workshop, but that's the biggest part. Those are the big parts.
Well, I think too, it's important to know what you're bringing to the table, because I think it's so easy. And I mean, maybe especially for women, but especially for me, like I go into relationships and I kind of like lose myself because I'm love to like take care of people and be of service, and like I'm not a very good receiver at all, and I'm working on it. But I think it's good to have the offer letter there to like read for yourself and say like, look, like this is what I'm bringing to this relationship. Am I able, like for me, it's, am I still able to bring that to the relationship? in the sense of like, am I
Mm-hmm.
giving too much and receiving too little? Because I mean, the men that I date are very like stereotypical, like masculine type of men, and they'd like to take care of me, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to be taken care of. So, but it's important to like, remind yourself of your worth and like also, you know, hold yourself to a certain standard. Like, am I still
Yeah.
bringing this
I
to the
mean,
relationship?
I love that you say that, because what you just said is exactly what happens. So what you just said is that I date these masculine men, providers, protectors, and it's really hard for me to receive. And I think that that is the epidemic right now that we're living in. That's what we're living in, is that we have built this beautiful community of women who have learned to take care of themselves, who have learned to be independent, to make their own money, to do all the things necessary to survive. And then we've got women who've now reached that next level of, now they know how to do everything, not just to survive, but to thrive. Right. And so it starts to make us feel like, is there somebody who can actually sit down at the table with us and bring the same things to the table that we're bringing? Are they living in a world where they are providing, protecting, whatever that looks like, whatever your standards are? And I think a lot of times we can't receive that from them because we've already in our fishbowl of like, but I can do all those things. I can do all those things. And that's great. And that I will never tell a woman not to. I can do so many. My dad and I have an amazing relationship. So he taught me how to change tires, change oil, like everything. I can do, like, I can literally do anything a man can do, unless it has to do with strength, because I'm not the most strong person.
Well, I think my issue is my grandpa is so amazing and just loves to take care of me so much that I don't even need a man because I've got the one that, you know, raised me growing up. If I need my oil changed, he takes
Oh,
my car and gets the oil changed. Like, I mean, does so much for me that I'm like, I have such a good example of someone taking care of me that I'm
yeah,
like,
and I think that
like, I don't need
that's
you.
exactly the attitude out in the world. And so what I sometimes trigger women around is saying that, but this is what happens, is that when we start to build a world where we don't need men, then men, this is going back to, we're such leaders in relationships with men that we don't embody that men start to turn into boys, right? And, or what I like to call are moys, right? Half man, half boy. And they start to turn into these moys because
Yeah.
they're going like, well, no one needs me, so I can just do whatever I want because I don't have any purpose. I don't have to provide or protect. And that's so ingrained in the masculine that when we take that away from them, then we're left with. So the other thing that's really ingrained in the masculine is adventure, right? Adventure, provide, protect. Those are the things that the masculine really masters and honors. And so when we take away provide and protect, we've got a bunch of boys who are living in adventure. And so what I always say to women is, hey, listen, when working on receiving, think of it as a bigger picture than I can do it myself. Think of it as I receive this man in front of me who's willing to provide for me, to do these things for me. What I'm doing is I'm actually healing his boy inside of him. I'm healing the part of him that only wants to be on adventure because he doesn't think he's good enough to be a provider or a protector. But I get to heal that. Like, I get to support that. And in return, we both have this beautiful partnership because I'm also going to teach him about the feminine. I'm going to dance in my underwear and sing, and I'm going to do all these beautiful things, and I'm going to be able to hold space for love and intimacy and vulnerability, And so I think it really triggers us sometimes to think that we are leaders in that way, but we are, and when we do it really well, it's really beautiful. I mean, Des is a perfect example of that. She was also my coach, and she's a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
And that woman could take care of, I mean, she's raising boys. So she can take care of it. But yeah, she
Mhm.
honors that feminine part of herself, that part that says, you know what, I can help heal you by letting you provide and protect for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's so funny that you brought up Des because her boyfriend literally cooked us this amazing dinner on
Mm-hmm.
Friday night, like just the two of us, like made us appetizers, served us wine, cooked us dinner. And it was just the nicest thing ever to just like
Mm-hmm.
sit back and like let a man do his thing and like take care of you because he genuinely, I mean, like obviously he's obsessed with Desiree, but he just like genuinely
Yeah.
wants to
No,
be of
I know what you
service.
mean. I think that it's funny because if you look at any of our,
And it says a lot about a man when he like not only wants to like take care of you, like
yeah,
because you know he's like sleeping with you and stuff like that, but when it like the way he like takes care of your friends or the way that he like takes care of your family and like or
yeah.
just
Well,
like
and that's what I
takes
was
care of
going
the
to say
people
right
in
now.
his
It's really
life.
interesting because I will get asked all the time by women, like, how do you have so many men that are friends? And by the way, all of my men who are friends very much are protectors and providers to me. And it's because I'm like, because I love that part of them. I just love it. Like one of the guy that actually produces and edits my podcast, he also comes over and put the ring on my doorbell. You know, like I was like, hey, I need someone to put the ring. I got the ring on my doorbell. He was there. He's like, when? He literally was like, I can do it today. And I was like, no rush. How about, and he was there. And when I've had to record my podcast and I've had to cancel because I'm sick, he's like, what do you need me to bring you? This is a man who's my friend. And he produces my podcast. But I always make the space for men to be men and to learn how to be men. I think we lose patience in their learning on how to be men. And I can get deeper into that, which sometimes I do on my podcast around how many men are raised by women and not men who haven't really taught them what it's like to be men. And that's a big epidemic in society nowadays, is how often that's a part of the masculine that's being lost. And I have some amazing brothers who are bringing it back, who are bringing back the masculine, healthy masculine, and mentoring men on how to be men again. But as women, we have the choice to also hold the space for their learning on how to be men. And so that's what I do for every man in my life. I hold the space for it because they're not perfect and they're going to fuck up, like we are. Yeah.
I mean, women, we have our own toxic, shitty things. Like, I think
Yeah.
women are worse to each other than they are to anyone else. Like, we definitely have a lot to work on, but I think that's actually like one of my word for the year was connection because I wanted to like really deepen my friendships and have like deeper connections with the people in my life. But one
Oh,
thing that
yeah.
I really wanted to do this year was to have more male friends. Like just guys that like don't want to sleep with me, like don't want to try and date me, that just like have someone to watch football with or like smoke cigars with because I love cigars or like drink,
Yeah.
bourbon with
Well,
and
it's
things
funny that
like
you
that.
mentioned that, is that that's actually one of the questions during ManMenu I ask women. And it's always the one that breaks my heart the most, is I ask them to think of about a man in their life that they admire. What qualities does he hold? And there's so many women who like open their eyes and go like, I can't think of any man I know who holds qualities that I admire. And I'll go, well, what about a father or grandfather? And they'll be like, no, my relationship with my father, like he's this, and that. I didn't have one with my grandfather. All of my ex-boyfriends were cheaters and and it's just this eye-opening for me of heartbreak of like, oh, so you haven't built healthy relationships with men. This is why you're here. This is why you're in this workshop right now, because that is part of the healing, is actually finding the men that you can exactly drink whiskey and learn from them and hear about what they did. Oh man, I had a friend tell me about a guy she worked with. She's like, oh, I have one guy in my life that I can admire. And like, he's the kind of guy that fosters puppies and, is the first person to volunteer to support a woman in whatever her endeavors are in the world, like all these things. And it makes a huge difference because that's how our perception of men starts to change. And then we can attract what we really, really want out of them because we can believe that it's possible.
Well, and so I sent a bunch of men your way for your podcast, and I was proud of
Yes,
myself
I
that
know.
I
Thank you for
even
that, by the
knew
way.
that many
I'm
men
like,
to
so
send your
excited 'cause that's
way.
my next, that's my next path.
But I was just like, damn, I was like, I'm so happy that like I have these
Yeah.
men in my life that
Yeah.
I admire
It's
enough to
it's
like
the
say that
best
they're a
feeling.
good
And it's
man.
really funny because a lot of times for In Search of Good Men, women will ask me, like DM me or message me, where do you find these men? And I always say the same thing, like they're all around us, but we actually have to show up powerfully to let them know that, they have the permission to be who they are. So first of all, they're all around us. These beautiful, healthy men are all around us. They do exist. And I say, and I usually find them through very powerful, beautiful, feminine women. Like those are the women I usually find my guests through. People like you, Chloe, and Des, and a few of my other girlfriends. That's what happens because these women are standing in their femininity and claiming their power and their leadership, and so they attract awesome guy friends.
I 100% agree. And like, I actually, it's so weird. I had a friend one time that she was like, I don't get how she was like, you're so strong and you're so independent, but like somehow men like still want to take care of you and be very gentle with you and just like,
Mm,
whatever. And she was like, and I feel like I'm horrible at receiving, like terrible at it. I've always been on my own. I was taught at a very young age to like the best thing to do for yourself is to be independent and like not to rely on anyone. And she was like, and I'm like just like you in the sense, independent and like I can take care of things myself and I do things by myself. And like she just
yeah.
attracts a
Well, and I
totally
think that,
opposite type of man than
I
I do
wonder how much of the
normally.
work has she done? Um, and when I talk about the work, like I know we say that a lot in the growth and development work, like you have to do the work, but the work is really facing your fears around XYZ, whatever that is. That's the work. Like that's the clearest explanation is facing your fears around. So if you have fears around intimate relationships with men and you haven't really admitted that or faced that, then you're going to attract a lot of men who are going to kind of hone in those fears, right? Like, because that's what you're holding. So they're going to like be the men that are just going to continue to feed that
Mm-hmm.
fear, right? And so if you've done the work and you're like, okay, I am afraid of, like, it could be, okay, I am afraid of intimacy, or I know it's really hard for me to receive because I am an independent woman. And my fear is that if I give up that independence, there's that's a bad thing or there's a wrongness in that or an ineffectiveness in that, right? If that's the fear and you faced it and you're going like, okay, the way around this is learning to receive, you're going to start to attract men who want to show you that, right? I want to show you. And it doesn't mean it's suddenly probably easy for you, Chloe, but it's going to
Mm-hmm.
continue to happen because you're already facing what that fear is. You're already facing that thing. You're not avoiding it or pretending it doesn't exist. You're going, oh, it's there. And now the universe is like, okay, let me send you all these men that,
So
and they don't have
yeah.
love interest, but that show you like it's not scary to receive and to let go a little bit of that warrior and just kind of sit in your goddess and receive.
Hey, badasses. Erica and I had such a good conversation. We got over 2 hours worth of content. I'm splitting the episode into 2 parts, so head on over to part 2 to hear the rest of our conversation. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay badass. Thanks for listening to the Badass Boss Babe podcast. We release an episode bi-weekly, so stay tuned. And in the meantime, follow us on social media at Badass Boss Babe Podcast to get a behind-the-scenes glimpse and more info about the show. As always, stay badass.